The Nexus Station's combat pit operated on a simple principle: violent sells and desperation pays premium rates. Tonight's main event had drawn a particularly diverse crowd of degenerates, each clutching betting slips with the fervor typically reserved for religious ceremonies or tax evasion. Vorthak, the bookmaker's tentacles danced across his calculation matrix, odds shifting like quantum probability waves. Current spread holds at 47-1 against the human, he announced through the arena's neural broadcast system. Frankly, I'm embarrassed to offer such generous terms, but regulations demand we maintain the pretense of fairness. The Calthek champion, Razor Crest of 9 victories, lounged in his preparation chamber like a scaled mountain of evolutionary success. Each of his previous opponents had lasted approximately 4 minutes before requiring medical reconstruction or memorial services. He'd earned his title through 3 decades of systematically dismantling supposedly dangerous creatures from 17 different star systems. "Tell me again why we're entertaining this farce," Razor Crest rumbled to his handler, a nervous pillion whose career prospects depended entirely on keeping his fighter motivated. "Humans barely qualify as sentient. Their homeworld hasn't even achieved dimensional transit." The handler consulted his datapad with trembling appendages. "The Galactic Entertainment Commission requires diversity quotas, champion. Besides, the crowd enjoys watching primitive species learn their place in the universal hierarchy." Through the arena's observation deck, various alien dignitaries observed the pre-combat rituals with the detached interest of academics studying particularly slow insects. Ambassador Gelkorth of the Hegemony adjusted his ceremonial viewing crown and sampled fermented Andromedan fruit while explaining human limitations to anyone within auditory range. "Observe their pathetic bone density," he lectured, gesturing toward the holding area where the human fighter waited. "Their muscle fiber composition suggests they evolved for endurance hunting, not combat. Essentially, they're persistence predators who mistake stubbornness for strength." The arena's central pit stretched 50 meters in diameter, surrounded by energy barriers designed to contain everything short of stellar collapse. Combat regulations permitted any naturally occurring biological weapons, though artificial enhancements faced strict penalties. The surface itself could adapt to simulate various planetary environments, though tonight's match would occur on standard gravity, with atmospheric composition suitable for carbon-based respiratory systems. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted biologicals," the announcer's voice resonated through the station's superstructure. "Tonight, we witness the convergence of proven excellence and evolutionary curiosity. In the champion's corner, representing 37 consecutive victories, and the Eintracht accumulated wisdom of Calthek warrior tradition, we present Razor Crest of 9 victories." The champion emerged to thunderous approval, his obsidian scales reflecting arena lighting like polished weaponry. Standing nearly 3 meters tall and possessing 4 arms ending in naturally occurring blade claws, he embodied millennia of apex predator evolution. His species had conquered their homeworld through superior combat instincts, then exported those skills across the galaxy through mercenary contracts and gladiatorial entertainment. "And challenging our champion," the announcer continued with barely concealed amusement. "Representing the recently contacted Sol system and humanity's first venture into sanctioned combat sports, we have—" "Hold on. What name did she provide?" The human emerged from the opposite tunnel wearing a simple gray jacket and standard-issue arena boots. She appeared remarkably unremarkable, approximately 1.7 meters in height, brown hair tied back functionally, and the sort of average build that suggested adequate nutrition without particular athletic specialization. Her most notable feature was an expression of mild boredom, as if she'd accidentally wandered into the wrong entertainment venue. She listed her designation as Murphy, the announcer reported, after consulting his information feed. Apparently, this constitutes a complete identification by human standards. Razor Crest examined his opponent with the professional interest of a craftsman selecting appropriate tools. This creature represents humanity's finest warrior? Murphy stretched her shoulders and cracked her knuckles, a gesture that produced appreciative chuckles from the audience. The sound of small bones popping seemed particularly amusing to species with exoskeletons. "I wouldn't say finest," she replied conversationally. "More like available." The betting boards updated frantically as spectators rushed to maximize their advantage. Several entrepreneurial vendors began selling commemorative items, celebrating what they assumed would be the shortest match in arena history. The concession stands reported record sales of refreshments, as most observers expected to finish their drinks before the violence concluded. Combat protocols engaging. The arena's artificial intelligence announced. Combatants have 60 seconds to prepare. Remember, deliberate torture extends beyond entertainment value into regulatory violations. Razor Crest performed his traditional pre-combat ritual, a series of movements designed to demonstrate his species' natural weapons while intimidating opponents. His claws extended to their full 20-centimeter length, each one capable of penetrating standard armor plating. His secondary arms flexed, revealing additional blade ridges along his forearms. The display had reduced previous opponents to paralyzed terror before combat even began. Murphy watched this demonstration with the polite attention typically reserved for museum guides explaining artifacts of moderate historical interest. "Impressive," she acknowledged. "You've clearly invested considerable time in presentation." Presentation? Razor Crest's voice carried the dangerous undertone his species employed before delivering killing strikes. "These are the tools that have ended 37 lives, human. Perhaps you misunderstand the nature of this engagement." "Oh, I understand perfectly." Murphy's expression shifted slightly, revealing something that made several observant spectators suddenly reconsider their beverage orders. "You kill things for money and entertainment. The audience bets on how quickly you'll accomplish this. Everyone assumes they know exactly how this ends." "Combat commencing in 10 seconds, the arena announced. Razor Crest settled into his ancestral fighting stance, weight distributed across 4 limbs, claws extended, muscle groups primed for explosive movement. Centuries of Calthek combat evolution had produced this perfect killing configuration. Murphy reached for her jacket's closure. 5 seconds. "You know what your mistake is?" she asked, beginning to shrug out of the gray fabric. "Enlighten me," Razor Crest replied, already calculating optimal strike patterns. "You're assuming this is my first time?" The arena's starting signal echoed across the pit just as Murphy's jacket hit the ground, and the betting boards throughout Nexus Station suddenly went very, very quiet. What the audience saw first were the arms, a roadmap of violence written in scar tissue across pale human skin. Not the decorative scarification some warrior cultures employed for intimidation, but the functional geography of someone who had survived encounters that should have required closed-casket funerals. Dr. Vex Millen, the Nexus Station's xenobiologist, dropped his ceremonial viewing goblet. The liquid splashed across his notes as he fumbled for his emergency communication device. "Medical Analysis Station, priority override. I need immediate cross-reference on human wound patterns. Subsection, military engagement indicators." The scars formed constellations of barely healed trauma. Razor-thin lines suggested blade work, precise, surgical, designed to incapacitate rather than kill quickly. Circular burn marks indicated energy weapon exposure at close range. But most disturbing were the jagged, irregular tears that spoke of improvised weapons and desperate circumstances. Razor Crest hesitated for the first time in his professional career. His species possessed excellent pattern recognition, an evolutionary advantage that helped identify prey, predator, and territory markers. These markings followed no pattern he recognized, which meant they represented something entirely outside his experience. "Beginning standard intimidation protocol," he announced, more to reassure himself than inform his opponent. Murphy rolled her shoulders, and additional scarification became visible along her back and neck. "Standard protocols," she mused, beginning to circle the arena's perimeter with fluid, economical movement. Everyone loves their protocols. The hegemony's military intelligence officer, Commander Thek Var, activated his private communication channel. Research Division, immediate query. What classification of human military training produces scarification consistent with energy blade exposure, kinetic projectile wounds, and, by the void, are those chemical burn patterns? Murphy's movement pattern defied conventional combat theory. She maintained no guard position, showed no obvious weapon preference, and seemed more interested in studying the arena's layout than engaging her opponent. Yet something about her casual survey of the environment suggested she was cataloging tactical advantages with professional efficiency. "Your species fascinates our xenoanthropology department," Razor Crest offered, attempting to regain psychological advantage through conversation. "They theorize humans developed persistence hunting as compensation for physical inadequacy." "Persistence hunting?" Murphy repeated, her tone suggesting she was considering the concept for the first time. "That's what they call it when you follow something until it dies from exhaustion." Interesting perspective. She paused near one of the arena's support pillars, running her fingers along its surface as if checking structural integrity. The gesture appeared casual, but several military observers noted she was testing for vibration patterns and material composition. Commander Thek Var's research division responded through encrypted channels. "Sir, preliminary analysis suggests these wound patterns match classified reports from the Outer Rim conflict zones. Specifically, they're consistent with survival training exercises conducted by human special operations units." "Survival training?" Thek Var transmitted back. "Define parameters." "Drop candidates in hostile environments without equipment or support. They remain until they demonstrate combat effectiveness against indigenous predator species. Casualty rates typically exceed 60%. The crowd's initial amusement had transformed into uncomfortable silence. Betting activity ceased entirely as spectators began recognizing that their entertainment had somehow become something else entirely. Murphy completed her circuit of the arena and stopped directly in front of Razor Crest. "You know what I learned during my first week on Kepler 442b?" she asked conversationally. "I confess ignorance regarding human educational experiences," Razor Crest replied, though his combat stance had shifted from aggressive to defensive, without conscious decision. "That thing you do, the claw extension, the muscle display, the territorial positioning, it works perfectly when you're the apex predator." Murphy's expression remained pleasant, almost friendly. "But evolution's funny. Sometimes the apex predator meets something that doesn't understand. It's supposed to be afraid." Razor Crest struck without further warning, four arms moving in coordinated patterns designed to overwhelm opponents through superior speed and multiple attack vectors. His claws traced killing arcs through the space Murphy had occupied a microsecond earlier. She wasn't there anymore. The human had moved with fluid precision, not away from the attack, but through it, her body following angles that utilized Razor Crest's momentum against his balance. Her left hand caught his leading arm at the joint, while her right delivered a strike to a nerve cluster that no human should have known existed. Razor Crest's primary weapon arm went numb instantly. "Kepler 442b has these fascinating arthropods," Murphy continued, as if their violent exchange had been a minor interruption in her travel narrative. "Six-limbed, natural armor plating, excellent sensory apparatus. Basically, they're you, but with better environmental adaptation. She released his arm and stepped back, allowing him to regain his footing while he processed the impossible reality that she'd just neutralized one of his natural weapons, using knowledge of Calthek anatomy that hadn't been shared with any other species. The first week, they killed 11 members of my unit, Murphy continued. Very efficient, very professional. They understood their environment, knew their advantages, followed their instincts. Razor Crest flexed his remaining functional arms, trying to restore circulation to the paralyzed limb while calculating new attack strategies for a 3-armed engagement. The second week, Murphy said, we started killing them back. Dr. Vex Millen's emergency communication device chimed with incoming data. His research request had returned results that made his normally steady hands shake as he transmitted the information to Arena Security. Arena Control, immediate alert status. The human combatants' scarification patterns match military records from 17 different hostile environments. This individual has survived extended combat operations against Class A xenobiological threats. Define Class A, Arena Control responded. Species capable of ending galactic civilization if they achieved space travel. The Arena's automated medical systems detected elevated stress indicators from audience members across multiple species. Whatever entertainment value this match had possessed was rapidly giving way to something resembling a public safety incident. Ambassador Jel Korth found himself leaning forward in his ceremonial viewing chair, his earlier confidence evaporating like atmospheric moisture in vacuum. Around the observation deck, conversations had devolved into urgent whispers and frantic data queries. Hegemony Intelligence Division, Priority Channel, he whispered into his personal communicator. I need everything we have on human military deployment patterns, specifically why one of their operatives is currently dismantling our understanding of interspecies combat dynamics. Razor Crest attempted a flanking maneuver, using his superior reach to force Murphy toward the arena's energy barriers. The tactic had proven effective against opponents who relied on mobility over strength. Unfortunately, Murphy responded by doing something that violated several fundamental assumptions about human physiology. She grabbed the energy barrier. The crowd's collective intake of breath created a brief vacuum in the arena's atmospheric processors. Energy barriers maintained temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius and carried electrical charges sufficient to stop a charging Rhinodon. They were designed to contain, not provide, tactical advantage. Murphy used the barrier as an anchor point, swinging her body in an arc that brought her feet into contact with Razor Crest's skull at roughly 40 kilometers per hour. The impact produced a sound like a small spacecraft experiencing structural failure. That shouldn't be survivable, Dr. Vex Millen muttered, frantically updating his physiological assessments. Human nervous systems can't process electrical feedback at those intensities. Murphy landed gracefully, her hands showing only minor burns that she seemed to consider equivalent to paper cuts. Funny thing about pain tolerance, she remarked, rotating her wrists to restore circulation. It's remarkably adjustable when survival depends on it. Across the observation deck, a cluster of Vorthak traders exchanged glances loaded with commercial implications. Their species had built an interstellar economy on risk assessment and resource acquisition. The eldest among them, profit seeker of distant ventures, activated his emergency trading protocols. Attention all Vorthak commercial interests, he broadcast on encrypted frequencies. Immediate revision to human species classification required. Previous assessment of primitive resource extraction candidates no longer applicable. His second-in-command consulted market fluctuation data. What classification should replace it? Unknown strategic threat. Recommend immediate cessation of expansion activities in Sol system periphery until further intelligence becomes available. Meanwhile, Razor Crest had recovered enough to attempt psychological warfare, a traditional Calthek strategy for destabilizing opponents who proved more resilient than anticipated. "Your scarification suggests extensive trauma," he observed, circling Murphy while his paralyzed arm gradually regained function. "What manner of creature inflicts such wounds on your kind?" Murphy considered the question with apparent seriousness. "Well, there were the hive builders on Proxima Station. Exoskeletal, about your size, excellent coordination. They had this approach to territorial defense that involved acid secretions." She gestured toward several of the circular burn scars along her arms. "Then the crystal hunters on Wolf 359's third moon. Silicon-based, naturally occurring energy, projection capabilities. They could maintain combat effectiveness even after losing 60% of their mass." More gestures, indicating the precise energy weapon scarification that had troubled the xenobiologist. And of course, the deep swimmers from the oceanic worlds in the vegan system. Tentacled, highly intelligent, masters of three-dimensional combat in aquatic environments. Razor Crest's psychological warfare strategy began backfiring spectacularly as Murphy's casual inventory continued. Each species she mentioned represented evolutionary advantages that should have made them undefeatable by human standards. "How many hostile environments has your species survived?" he asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want the answer. "Survived?" Murphy tilted her head, considering the terminology. "That's an interesting way to phrase it. We prefer to think of it as problem-solving with extreme prejudice." Security Chief Claw Render, a veteran of several minor interstellar conflicts, watched the proceedings through multiple visual spectrums while running tactical analysis programs. His security briefings had never mentioned humans possessing combat capabilities beyond basic tool usage and pack hunting behaviors. "Arena Control, I'm implementing Containment Protocol 7, he announced over internal channels. "This engagement has exceeded parameters for standard entertainment." "Define exceeding parameters," Arena Control responded. "The human combatant is demonstrating knowledge of alien physiological vulnerabilities that suggests systematic study of multiple species. This indicates intelligence-gathering operations on a scale that—" He paused, processing implications. "That suggests we may have been infiltrated." Murphy had resumed her casual examination of the arena's infrastructure, apparently more interested in the ventilation systems and structural support than her increasingly desperate opponent. Razor Crest, reduced to 3 functional limbs and growing doubts about his evolutionary superiority, attempted a final gambit. "Surely you cannot claim victory against every species you encounter," he challenged. "What of those that proved your equal?" Murphy stopped her inspection and looked at him with something approaching sympathy. "Equal?" she repeated. "That's a comforting thought, isn't it? That somewhere in the galaxy, there's a species that can match human adaptability, human persistence, human willingness to learn from every mistake and turn every failure into tactical advantage." She began walking toward him with unhurried steps. "The truth is, Razor Crest of 9 victories, we haven't found our equal yet. But we keep looking. We keep testing. We keep gathering data." The arena's emergency lighting activated as Security Chief Claw Render's containment protocols engaged. Energy barriers intensified, atmospheric composition shifted to support sedation gases, and automated medical systems prepared for mass casualty treatment. "Because every time we encounter a new species," Murphy continued, now close enough that Razor Crest could see the calculation in her eyes, "we learn something new about survival, about adaptation, about the creative applications of violence when everything else fails." She reached out and gently touched his remaining functional arm. "And we always, always remember to take notes." What happened next defied the combat regulations, the laws of physics, and several insurance policies. Murphy's gentle touch on Razor Crest's arm triggered a neural cascade that shut down his motor functions completely. Not through brute force or alien technology, but through precise application of pressure to nerve clusters that existed only in classified Caltech medical databases. Razor Crest collapsed like a marionette with severed strings. The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as a meditation aid. Across the observation deck, various species' fight-or-flight responses activated simultaneously, producing a rainbow of defensive postures and emergency pheromone releases. Vorthak, the bookmaker's tentacles, had stopped moving entirely, his calculation matrix frozen on odds that no longer applied to any recognizable reality. "Transaction void," he announced weakly. "All bets canceled due to unprecedented circumstances." Murphy walked to the center of the arena and looked up at the observation deck with the patient expression of someone waiting for public transportation. "I believe customary protocols require a victory speech," she called out conversationally. "Though I suspect most of you have already figured out the relevant details." Arena Control's communication systems crackled with overlapping priority transmissions as various intelligence services, military commands, and commercial interests attempted to process what they'd witnessed. The cacophony resembled a market crash filtered through a diplomatic incident. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted biologicals," Murphy continued, appropriating the announcer's earlier phrasing. "Thank you for attending this evening's demonstration. The Terran Strategic Intelligence Division extends its appreciation for your involuntary participation in our ongoing xenobiological research program." Ambassador Gelkorth felt something that his species' emotional vocabulary couldn't adequately describe, a combination of existential dread and professional embarrassment that suggested his diplomatic career had just terminated. "Strategic Intelligence Division," he whispered. "The humans have a Strategic Intelligence Division?" Commander Thekvar was frantically updating threat assessment protocols, while simultaneously requesting emergency consultation with the Hegemony's War Planning Committee. "Arena Control, immediate evacuation procedures. This station may be compromised." "Compromised how?" Arena Control responded, though their voice carried the hollow tone of someone already knowing the answer would be unpleasant. "If one human operative has achieved this level of intelligence penetration, we must assume systematic infiltration across multiple systems. This entire facility could be a collection point for strategic intelligence." Murphy nodded approvingly, as if she'd overheard the transmission. "Commander Thekvar demonstrates admirable tactical thinking. Yes, this facility has been collecting quite useful information for approximately 18 months. Combat capabilities, defensive systems, interspecies diplomatic tensions, commercial trade routes, military deployment patterns." She gestured toward the observation deck with casual familiarity. "Really, you've all been remarkably cooperative. Though I suppose that's the advantage of hiding intelligence operations inside entertainment venues. No one suspects the gladiator match of being a reconnaissance mission." Profit Seeker of Distant Ventures was simultaneously updating his commercial threat assessments and calculating the market implications of humanity's apparent transition from emerging species to galactic-level strategic threat. His trading algorithms were producing results that suggested immediate liquidation of all assets in human-adjacent systems. "Emergency trading halt," he broadcast across Vorthak commercial networks. "Human species reclassification from primitive expansion opportunity to existential market threat. Recommend immediate cessation of all commercial contact until strategic capabilities can be assessed." Security Chief Claw Render's containment protocols had achieved the opposite of their intended effect. Instead of securing the situation, they'd simply demonstrated the inadequacy of standard security measures against human operational planning. "Arena Control, we have a problem," he reported, with the tone of someone discovering their insurance doesn't cover acts of strategic deception. "The containment systems were never designed to handle intelligence operatives. They're designed to contain gladiators." Murphy walked over to where Razor Crest lay paralyzed but conscious, and crouched beside him with the bedside manner of a field medic. "The neural disruption will fade in approximately 6 hours," she informed him quietly. "No permanent damage. Professional courtesy among combat specialists." She stood and addressed the observation deck once more. "For those wondering about operational parameters, tonight's engagement achieved several objectives. Primary, assessment of Calthek combat capabilities under controlled conditions. Secondary, evaluation of interspecies intelligence sharing protocols during crisis events. Tertiary, measurement of defensive response times across multiple alien command structures. The arena's environmental systems detected what could only be described as collective hyperventilation across 17 different respiratory configurations." "Mission parameters fulfilled," Murphy announced, reaching into a concealed pocket and producing a small communication device. "Extraction protocols authorized." A section of the arena floor dissolved, revealing a transportation platform that had been integrated into the station's infrastructure so seamlessly that even the original architects probably hadn't noticed the modification. Murphy stepped onto it with the casual efficiency of someone catching a scheduled transport. "Oh, and Ambassador Gelkorth?" she called out as the platform began its activation sequence. "Your earlier lecture about human persistence hunting was particularly enlightening. We've been persistence hunting for quite some time now. We just operate on a slightly larger scale than most species expect." The transportation platform engaged, and Murphy vanished in a cascade of light that suggested technology several generations beyond anything in the Nexus station's databases. The observation deck remained silent for approximately 30 seconds before erupting into the sort of chaos typically reserved for natural disasters or economic collapses. Vorthak the bookmaker was the first to speak, his voice carrying the bemused tone of someone who'd just witnessed the fundamental laws of probability file for bankruptcy. "Well," he announced to no one in particular, "I suppose the house doesn't always win after all." Outside the station's viewports, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the fact that several galactic civilizations had just discovered they'd been sharing the neighborhood with something far more interesting than they'd originally assumed.